Welcome back, aliens. So my name is Devin Reddy, and in this video, let's try to write a Corda application. In the last video, we have downloaded the Corda project, which was developed by Corda itself. The entire project was ready. So we studied some of the components, and then we ran it. We saw the output. In this video, let's write the code from scratch. Now, there's a problem here. When you say you want to write a code from scratch, we are not writing hello world code, right? We are writing an application on a platform. So basically, we need to do a lot of configuration. Now, there are two options here. Either you can write the entire configuration for the platform by yourself, or you can get a project which is a bootstrap project which will help you with all the necessary files. You need to focus on the main logic, and that's what we do in the real life, right? We don't do everything from scratch. We work on a very basic project and we expand it as per our requirement. So in this case, let's get that project. So what we will do is, so we'll go to github.com/Corda, and they have, as I mentioned before as well, they have so many repositories here. We will be going for a template. Now, of course, you can go with the Kotlin version as well, but since I'm assuming that most of you know Java, so we'll go for a Java template here. Now, this template will give you a basic structure. It will give you some dependency files. It will give you some properties which you have to use. And yes, it will also give you a base code, but then we will be deleting those codes and we'll write from scratch, right? That's the plan. So we'll divide this video into two parts. The first part will get this project. We'll run this minimalistically so that we'll get some output. In the next video, we'll try to expand it. So let's open this and let's get this template. Now you can see there are so many folders. We'll explore them one by one. So let's click on this, get this link. Now to open this, you have to open command prompt. And here we'll say git clone and we'll paste it. Oh, but for that, we need to go to some folder where we can do this. Okay, so I'm in a folder which is desktop workspace where I will have all my projects. So I will say git clone. Now once you do that, it will download the repository in your machine. This will download the basic structure. So now you have a project with you, right? How do you open this? Of course, you will be using IntelliJ and IDE. Of course, you can prefer any IDE you like, but I will be going for IntelliJ here. And we'll click on open. Now when you click on open, it will ask you for a path. So we know it's in workspace. Let's click on the Corda template Java, click on OK, and this will open the project. Now, since you're doing this for the first time or you have done the earlier project, you will be having those dependencies in your machine. So it will not take much time. But if you're doing this for the first time on any machine, it will download all the jar files, okay? And it takes a lot of time. And I'm not sure if this really downloading the jar files here. So it will show you this option which is load Gradle project, or you will directly see the option on the window. So when you click on this, it will, okay, so you have to say trust this project. It will download all the jar files if you're doing this for the first time. So you can see still now we don't have any external jar files or external libraries coming here. So I guess it's downloading. There might be some version change because I've already did that on this machine before, but still it is syncing. So it might take some time. So it is downloading all the jar files. So it will take some time. Need to fast forward the video. So as you can see, we got all the dependencies here. Now, the important dependencies which we have to look for is this one, the Corda dependencies. Now, this is where it provides you all the things required. So the network, the nodes, configuration, if you want to test your application, if you want to serialize the request, it provides everything. And with this, there are some other dependencies as well, which we are going to use. We don't have to look at all the dependencies, but yes, you have so many dependencies. One of them is Corda, which will be used for the flow. Again, we'll see that once we start using it. Let's look at the structure of this project. I know it looks complex when you look this for the first time. And trust me, when I was looking at it, there was so many configurations to remember. And even if you want to make a small change, you should know where to change, right? Now, if you know Java, or if you have worked on Spring Framework before, or if you have worked with Maven or Gradle, it will be a bit familiar, but still you need to look at the settings, right? So we'll start from the bottom. Again, I'm not going for the important files. I'm just going for the files. Okay, so of course we can skip trademark. Let's go to settings.gradle. Now this is where you have all the modules which we are going to use. Now what are modules? Example, this clients, contracts, and workflow. These are the modules in this project. So you can create a separate module and you can include that in your project. Okay. Next we have this file, which is repositories. See, we know that this project will need a lot of dependencies. Now, these dependencies can be public dependencies. This can be specific to Corda. This can be specific to some library. So you have to mention all the libraries from where you will get this, or all the resources from where you will get this. Now, if you have been using Maven, we use Maven repository as the public one. But for this one, we will be using these three links. Next is this one. Now, this file is interesting because this is where it will automatically do a lot of things for you. So this is basically a script which will automate the process of deploying the libraries. Now this file is actually used to automate the deployment. Now it's a difficult task to do that, right? First you have to get all the source file, you have to compile them, you have to deploy them on the server, you have to start the nodes. So everything will be here in this file. Now if you look at this is a normal scripting file or script. Now this file is important. Okay, so in this file you can see we have the names. Now this is where you will mention the jar file name. Okay, so when you compile this, I will show you how the jar file looks like. The most important file is build.gradle, but this file uses constants.property. Now this is where you mention all the version numbers. As I mentioned before, you need a lot of dependencies and you need to specify the versions as well. So there are two ways you can make this project. You can use Java, you can use Kotlin, right? So we are using Java project, so we have to mention all these properties. So this is where you are mentioning the Corda version. This is where you are mentioning the Gradle plugin version. And if since we are using log4j as well for the logging, we have this version. Now where you are going to use all this version is in this file, which is build.gradle. Now if you open this, it's a very big file if you can see, but we'll go step by step in this. I wanted to write the entire code by myself, writing all the version numbers, repositories, and the nodes as well. But it will take a lot of time. And even if I do that, you will not understand in the first go. So I would recommend you to follow along, try it by yourself, open this file and go step by step on each line. Not difficult to understand, but yeah, difficult to remember. So what we will do is first we'll get all the version numbers. Now this is the extra block in Gradle where you can mention all the version number. Then you're mentioning from where you will get all the repositories and the plugins you're going to use. Now for this example, I'm not going to use Spring Framework, so you can skip this one. So even if I delete this line, nothing will happen because we will not be building a client side for this particular application. It has client folder, but we'll delete that as well. So we can skip this part, which is Spring Framework. Next we have to mention is all the plugins required. So we are going to use Cordapp plugin, which will help you to get all these commands in dependencies, which is Corda compile, Corda runtime, and Cordapp. Then you need a chord formation. Now this is helpful to run the node on a local machine. And then we have a cursor util. Now this will be useful for the flows. So once we start with the flow, this is the library or this is the plugin which will be useful. Now with this, we need certain dependencies as well. So we need Corda code, which is the network which will give you. Then you need an API to interact with the server. And then you need a Corda library. Okay, next up we have these two projects. Now as I mentioned, you have different modules, right? So you can mention in this Corda project, what are two important modules you have or dependencies you have. So we have workflow and we have contracts. Now I hope you remember the theory of Corda. We have talked about key concepts, right? So we have talked about contracts, we have talked about states, we have talked about the flow. So this is what we have talked about. Now this thing we'll talk about this after some time, deploy nodes and those things. So let's close this. Now don't get confused by all these folders. Now first of all, we don't need client. Now why do we have a client here is because we have a Corda application. What if someone wants to interact with it from the external world? Maybe using REST API request or something. So we need this client folder. But since we're not doing that, let's delete this one just to have a simple code. So first we'll say remove module. And we'll delete this as well as a folder. Now let's explore this two folder, which is contracts and workflow. Now this is where you will write the code for the entire operation. Now what we are going to achieve here. So in the last video, we ran the application. We were able to create an IOU, and we were able to send that IOU to the borrower. So lender will create a IOU, and lender will sign it, and then the borrower will sign it, then the notary will sign it, and we have seen that process, right? We'll do the same thing, but we'll write a code from by ourselves. Now for that, what are the things you need? First, we need a state. Now what is a state? So state represents your fact. Example, let's say IOU. So that will be your one state, right? Now this will have the value. This will have two parties, basically, the lender and the borrower. Maybe it can be a mobile phone application as well, where we want to know who owns this mobile phone, maybe an asset. So you can say what is the asset, who owns it, and those things, the value of the asset. So those things will be represented with the help of a state. So we'll expand this SRC, we'll go to main, we'll go to Java, we'll go to this library, the package. And then when you open this states, you have this state, which is template state. Of course, we'll not be using the same name. We will be using a name which matches with your project. So since we are working with IOU, so we'll replace this. So we'll say refactor. I want to change it to IOU state. Okay, once you do that, let's open this. Now it has so many lines. What we will be doing here is we'll say select all and delete. Okay, so we'll write a code from scratch here. And then we have contracts. So this is a contract. So we'll touch this later. But by the time we can refactor this, and we'll rename it as IOU contract. Okay, two things done. Now with this we have flow. Now in flow we'll be having two basic flows. One is the initiator and one will be responder. So we'll go with the same names. Of course you can change it to something which makes much more sense, but for this example these two names make sense to me. So we'll go with that itself. Now if you go to IOU state, so what a state should represent. Now first of all, how do you create a state in Java? So whenever you want to create something, you first mention a package name. So we are in com.template.state. So let's mention that here. Next thing you have to mention is a class, right? Of course, we need a lot of import statement, but we'll use IntelliJ to get that. So we'll say public class, and let's create a class. The class name should be the same as file name, which is IOU state. Okay, so how do you make a state? So basically, if you want to make this as a state class, you need to implement an interface called contract state. So that's how you make a state. Now we need to import this package. So we'll say control space, and this is a package from where you will get it. Now what's the issue is, whenever you implement an interface, you need to implement all the methods which are there in this interface. So let's click on this and say yes, implement the methods. Okay, thankfully we only have one method to implement, so let's do that. So you can see we got this method. We'll fill that method in some time, but before that, let's specify some properties. See, every state will have certain properties, right? In the example, in this case, when you say IOU, so if you are giving money to someone else, so we have to mention the value, the amount. You have to mention who is giving and who is receiving. So maybe you can say sender or receiver, or you can say lender or borrower. So let's use those terms. So we'll say private, we'll make final variables because we don't want to change it once assigned. So let's say I want to assign a value, but will not assign the value now. We'll say private final. We need to specify the lender. Of course you can say sender receiver, but let's say lender. And then we'll say private final party borrower. Okay, once you got these three variables, there's an issue. We need to import the package for party. So let's import the package, and done. So you can see we got three variables here. And let's create a constructor using which you can get these values. So you can say alt insert in IntelliJ, it will give you a pop-up, and you can say get me a constructor for all these three variables, and done. So we got a constructor which takes all these three variables and assign the values. Simple, right? I also need getter setters, so not setters. I only need getters because it's a private variable. So we'll say, so it's a final variable, that's why you can only use getter. Now once you got all the getters, now what next? We also need to implement this one because we want to return all the participants of this state. Now how many participants we have? We have only two, right? We have lender and borrower. But what if you want another participant? You can simply add that as well. Now how do you add it? So basically we will be having an array, right? So We'll say arrays dot as list, and in this bracket you mention your participant. So we'll say lender and borrower. So if you have 3, you can give a comma and mention that as well. Let's import the package and done. This is how you create IOU. I know it doesn't look that simple, right? But yeah, that's a fact. It is that simple. The only thing you have to mention here is, see, every IOU is linked with contract. So every state is linked with a contract. So every time you make a change in the state, it will go through a contract. It will check for the constraints. So how do you mention that this state belongs to some contract? With the help of an annotation. So you can mention belongs to contract, and you can mention the contract name here. So you can say this belongs to IOU contract. And that's it. It still says 2 problems. I guess the 2 problem is with the test cases, if I'm not. Yeah. The thing is, this thing is actually used by the test cases. So what we will do here is we'll go to those test cases. It's always a good practice to write test cases before writing the code, but since we are into learning state, so what we will do here is we'll comment the entire code for testing. This problem solved. The next problem is where? I guess problem solved. There's a problem with the contract, but we'll solve that later. Now go back to contract. Now in this contract, you can see, so what is contract? Basically, this is where you specify the condition. So let's say if someone says, hey, I want to change the state. So initially I was owning a phone and now I'm selling this phone. So of course the state will change. But even before you change the state, you have to check for some constraints, right? And you can mention all the constraint in this method, which is verify. But what we will do as of now is we'll remove all the constraint because we don't want to check that now. As I mentioned before, we'll go step by step. I don't want to check for constraint. And timing, let me just remove the comments as well. It is making your code look bulky. Comments are good, but not helpful when you want to see everything in the. Okay, so this is where you got a contract. As you can see, we have emptied our contract here. Of course, you can write the code from scratch. I should have done that, right? But yeah, it's very simple, right? So we have a class. Class name is IOU contract, and we'll implement a method called contract. This is how you make a contract class in Corda. And then every contract needs an ID. This is how you assign an ID, right? So we have to mention a string variable. So this will be useful once we go for the flow. I will show you. So this is IOU contract actually. Now there is a verify method. Now this verify method will verify the contract for us. And this is a command. Now what's a command? Remember when we have talked about the intent. So whenever you do a transaction, every transaction needs an intent. Why you're doing that? Is it you want to send money, you want to refund, you want to mint money? So you have to mention your intent there, right? So we have emptied this. So if you have multiple intent or you have multiple commands, you can just simply create a separate class for that and it should work. That's it, right? Everything is done. Now let's do a transaction. Now what type of transaction I want to do? So basically we will be having multiple parties. Let's say we have 2 parties, party A and party B. Now party A wants to send IOU, or party A will create an IOU and will send it to B. Okay, so that's a flow, right? So we are doing multiple steps here. So how do we achieve that? So we have an initiator. So what we will do here is, this is a flow. Of course, you can see there are so many code here. We'll select this and we'll delete. Let's write this code by ourselves, at least this one. So how this code will look like? Now, first of all, package name, right? So we cannot forget the package name. So we'll say package, and the package belongs to com.template.flows. The next thing you have to mention is a class. So we'll say public class initiator. Okay, now what makes a class a flow, right? So it's a very special class here. So you need to extend a class called flow logic. Now this is what makes your normal class a flow. And you have to also mention the type. We'll say void. So the generic type is void here. We don't want to mention anything. Okay, now this initiator will have what? See, one party will initiate the transaction, right? And the second party will receive it. So whenever you initiate, we know which party has initiated it. But we also want to know the recipient. So this initiator need to have 2 variables, the value and the other party. Now why not the sender party? Is because it is initiating, right? So we can get that. But we need 2 variables. One is IOU value, and the second one is the party. So it's the other party, and we need to import the package for this one. Okay, now see, if you remember the theory, we have seen the steps, right? You saw on the you saw the steps. It says starting, it will sign the transaction, then it will verify the transaction, it will do the notary. So to maintain that progress, we need to get a progress tracker. So what we'll do is we'll create one more variable. Of course, we'll not be implementing that in this video, in this example, but let's say have that. Because I have faced one of the issue when I was using the older version, it was giving issue without progress tracker. So to be on safe side, let me just write it. Let me know in the comment section when you have not used progress tracker, was it working? Okay, so we'll say progress tracker equal to new progress tracker. So as I mentioned before, we'll not be using this. Since we are using it, we will be needing a return method to return this. Getter for only, so I want to return only progress tracker. Okay, and I also need a constructor to assign the values, right? So again, we'll do the same thing. We'll say alt insert, and we'll get the constructor for these two variables. And then we are done. Is it? Yeah, we're done. So we got these two, we got a constructor, we got a progress method, and now let's focus on the important code. See, if you look at this, there is an error, it says, and the error is the flow logic is an abstract class. So basically we have to implement the methods. Oh, so which method we are going to implement? So if you jump back here, so let's implement the method. So thankfully we have only one method to implement, which is call. Let's use that. Now, whatever you want to do in this transaction, you have to mention here. Now, what are the things you need? First, we need to know who is the notary, right? Of course, right? If you do a transaction, the finality will be defined by the notary. So first we need to get the notary. Second, we need to define the output state. We also need a command because that's where you specify the intent. Okay, basically the command holds everything. It holds the transaction. It holds the key. It will hold the intention. Now, once you have your notary known, once you have your output state, once you have your command ready, you will be creating a transaction builder. Now, it's a basically builder pattern to add multiple properties to it. So basically we have to get a transaction, and in that transaction, you have to mention who is the notary, you have to mention the output and the command. That's it. You have your transaction ready with you. Okay, but then as a sender, you will have your transaction, right? So you first have to sign the transaction, and then you have to send that to the party B. Now, of course, party B has to sign it. Then we have to do the notary, but we'll do that steps later. In this code, what we will do is we'll sign the transaction. We'll send the transaction to B and say, hey, that's done. Save that in your ledger. So, okay, so basically we are not asking for the responder to actually do anything. Just take the value and save it. Just to keep it simple. Okay, so how do we do that? So as I mentioned, step one, we need a notary. So we'll say final party. We need a party which is notary party, which is notary. And then you need to, so how do you get this? So first of all, you need to get the object of service hub. Now, how do you get that? So you will say get service hub. Now, service hub knows about the network map. Remember, we need to get, so we have all the mapping of the numbers and the names. So you need to get the network map. Once you have that, you need to get all the notaries in the network. It is possible that you might be having multiple notaries. So you can say get notary identities, but then I don't need all, right? I just need one. So we can get the first one. So we'll say get 0. So it will give me the first notary available in the list. Now, once you do that, the next step is to create an output. Now let's say final IOU state, and we'll say output. Okay, so output will be of IOU state, of course. So just to reiterate, Corda also follows UTXO, which is unspent transaction output. So whenever you do a transaction, you basically create an output, which is unspent. Now that output will become an input for some other transaction, right? So the input after transaction becomes a spent or consumed state, right? So that becomes the history. So here we'll say new IOU state, and you have to specify 3 things. So this output, so who is, first of all, what is the value? Then who is the sender or who is the lender here? So yeah, lender and borrower. So we'll say get our, so we are the lender, right? So we can say get our identity, and the other party is the party. Remember, when we created this variable, I said someone has to initiate, the lender has to initiate this. So whoever initiate will get that identity here. Okay, once you got your notary, once you got your output, the next thing you have to create a command. So thankfully we have all the classes available, right? So we can simply use that. So we'll say command equal to a new command. We are creating a new command here. And okay, so in this new command we'll specify, so basically a command will take an object of a command itself. We have a command created? Yes, we have. So if you see IOU state, so if you see the contract, we have a command here which is called send. So actually it should not be send, right? We are creating a new IOU. So we can say create. So let's get back to it. Let's get back here and we'll say new IOU contract create. IOU contract dot commands that, yeah, create. So first you have to import the package and done. Okay, why it's not working? We need the object of a create. So we'll say create. Let's also mention two other properties. I don't know what is getting wrong here. So we mention our key as well because we are sending it. So we'll mention our identity dot get owning key. So this will give you your key to sign the transaction. Okay, so that was the issue. We have to fill this as well. So yeah, so you have to say create and you have to mention the key as well. Okay, once you have this, let's create a transaction builder. So we'll say final transaction builder. We'll say builder equal to new transaction builder. Okay, so whenever you create a transaction builder, you need to specify the notary. So who will do the notary? So we already created a notary here. So we'll specify that here. And you also need to mention two things, the output and a command. So you can simply say builder dot add output state. We have the output ready. We have to mention the command. You have to also mention the command. So we'll say add command. The command is command. I know, weird names, right? Okay, done. So we got a notary, we got the output, command, transaction builder ready. It's time to sign the transaction. The good thing is Corda provides you with all the required classes and the methods. The bad thing is there are so many classes and methods to remember, right? But yeah, once you get used to it, it's easy to remember. Okay, so we'll say signed transaction, and let's get a variable signed transaction equal to. Okay, how do you get this object? So basically, again, we have to use the service hub object, get service hub dot sign initial transaction with the help of a builder. Okay, once you got your signed transaction, so basically this is where you get the object of signed transaction. Okay, so it will give you the signed transaction, right? So it will take from the builder, it will sign the transaction for you, and this will have a signed transaction. Okay, now once you have a signed transaction, let's create a flow session. Now why do we need a flow session here is because this initiator has to send the transaction to the responder, right? So we'll say flow session. Let's import the package. We'll mention other party's session equal to initiate flow other party. So flow session other party session equal to initiate flow other party. Okay. So this statement basically initiate a flow and this will call the responder. And then if everything is done, we need to create a separate flow. So we can say subflow. Now why is a subflow? Because it creates a subflow as the name suggests, and it will do the finality for you. Basically it will store the data in the ledger. So we'll say finality flow. And this is also responsible to verify the transaction with the help of notary. And then it will save the data in the ledger. So it's a signed transaction, and you have to also mention the other party's session. And that's it from this side. Now anything is remaining here? Yes. The thing is, this initiator will be called initiating flow, right? So we have to mention that with the help of annotation that this is an initiating flow. Next, this should be called with the help of RPC as well. And to do that, we have to say startable by RPC. So you have to add these two annotations. So first, this is the initiating flow. This is a start, and this can be called by the RPC. Now this thing doesn't apply to the responder, of course, because responder will be called by the initiator. So this is from the initiator. Let's go to responder to make some changes. And there's so much of code here. Let's write this code. I think you now understand the code, right? So we don't have to write this from scratch. We can remove these comments just to make it look good. Okay, one thing I want to change, I want to refactor this variable. Okay, so I want to change this variable to other party session. And this one as well, mention that here. Okay, that's the one thing I want to change. And there's so much of comments here, right? Let's remove everything from here. Looks cool. In fact, you know what we will do? Let's remove the sign transition as well, because we are not doing any signing as of now. We just need to receive the flow. Remember, in the initiator, we are sending that flow. So here we have to receive the flow. Why there's an error here? Because we are not sending it here. Let's remove that. A very simple one, receive finality flow, and it will accept the other party session. That's it. This is the only thing you have to do here. One thing to remember, we have to mention initiated by. This will be initiator, right? So in initiator, you are saying initiating flow because this is a start, and responder will be called by the initiator. And that's it. That's the only thing you have to do. Let's go to contract, and everything is done in the contract as well. I hope this will work. There is an error here. Oh, bracket expected. Okay. Cool. This is done. Let's run this code. Now, how do you run this? Now, first of all, you need to deploy the nodes. But where do we have the nodes? Have we done anything to do that? And the answer is yes. Remember in the build.gradle, I've told you we will see this after some time, and that's your deploy nodes task. So in the Gradle as well, you can mention all the tasks. So in this, you can see we are mentioning we have 3 nodes. Basically, we have a node tree here, the node which is node tree. Then we have a node which is party A, and then we have a node which is party B. Of course, we can create another node here which is party C, but we'll see that in the next video. But we have two nodes here, or 3 nodes basically. So let's run these nodes. Now, how do you run this? Now for that, same as the last video, we have to execute some commands. So basically we have to go to terminal, and this is where you have to say gradle.bat. Now depend upon what system you're using. Linux, for Linux it is different. It is /gradle without that bat, and you have to mention deploy nodes. And for Windows you have to say gradle.bat deploy nodes. In fact, you can also mention clean so that it will delete the old one. It will clean and it will do the deployment. Say enter. It will take some time. So let me just fast forward this. So this is actually a very resource intensive deployment. So if you see the taskbar, it's consuming 100% of my CPU. It is i7, and you can see how much CPU power it is taking. So it's almost done, the task. You can see it is deployed all the thing. Is it? Yeah. So it says generating the node directory for A and node tree party A and party B. Now where you will find all this, if you go to build, this is where you will find all the nodes. So if you expand this, you can see we have node tree, party A, party B, right? And this is a jar file which you have to run. This is a script you have to run. Okay, so once you have your nodes ready, it's time to run those nodes. So come back here and say call build /nodes/run nodes.bat. Run the script, and it will open 3 windows, one for node tree, one for party A, and one for party B. And I love these jokes here. So you can see, how did a Java programmer get rich? They inherited a factory. Awesome. Okay, now once you have your 3 nodes ready, it's time to execute a transaction, right? Now how will you do that? Now even before executing a transaction, what we can do is we can check the vault. So let's focus on one party here. So you can say this is party B. So this is party A and this is node tree, right? So we'll go to party A and let's check the vault here. Now to do that, we have a command which is run vault query contract state type : let's mention the package name and a class. So we'll say com.template.states.iou state. So let's say enter, and you can see it is empty. So as of now, the entire state is empty. Let's create one by running a flow. So first of all, we need to know how many flows we have. So we can check by doing that flow list. So this is the inbuilt Corda flow. This is the flow which we have created, which is initiator. And if you observe, we don't have the responder, because responder will be called or initiated by the initiator, right? Okay, so let's run the flow. So we'll say flow start. Let's mention the name of the flow, which is IOU flow. And here we have to mention certain properties. So I will say IOU value. So let's say value is 50. And one thing to remember, you have to give this space, which is very important. If you don't specify space here, you might face errors. Party, give a colon, and here we have to mention the party name. So we are sending from party A to party B, right? But we don't know the name of the party. So we'll go back here. So this is a party, right? So we'll copy this. It's always better to copy paste because we will not make mistakes. Okay, so this is a party which we are working with. Let's say enter. Oh, no matching flow found. Oh, sorry, the flow name is initiator, right? Why I went for IOU? Maybe I'm still working on the last code. Okay, once you do that, you can see it is giving you some steps and it also gives you an error. Okay, so we forgot to add suspended on one of the flow method. Now why it has to be suspended? So let's go to initiator. And yes, we forgot to add suspended. Now why it is required is because, see, sometime when you initiate a flow, it will take some time for the responder to respond. It might take 1 day or 2 days or 1 month. In this case, you want it to get serialized. So you will say suspendable. Okay, that's one thing. Remember, now the only thing is if you make changes, you have to rebuild, you have to redeploy. Okay, so once it is deployed, let's run the run command again, run nodes. So this time our party A is here. Let's run that command again. So we'll say flow start initiator and we'll mention the IOU value is of, let's say 50 again, and we'll mention the other party. Okay, and then I hope this will work this time. And when you say enter, so you can see it has not given you any error. So something has happened. Let's also see the vault now. So we'll say run vault query contract state type discom dot template dot states dot IOU state. And when you say enter, oh, there is an error. And the spelling mistake it is. Okay, so you can see when I say enter now, it is giving you the text. It says the lender is A, party A, the borrower is party B, and this is the entire details here. You can check the same thing on the party B. So if I just copy this and go back to party B, where's party B now? So party B is here. So paste, and if you say run, you can see you will get the same details. But if you do the same thing on Notary, Notary will not have your data, right? It will be empty. This is the beauty of Corda. But one thing is missing. The signature has been done only by lender, not by the receiver. Next, we have not added any constraint. So we'll do that in the next video. So let's sign it by the responder as well. And let's add some constraints in the contract. So I hope you enjoyed this video where we did something with the Corda framework. We were able to create an IOU, send it, and also sign it. So in the next video, let's expand this and let's put all the constraints. So that's it from this video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comment section and do subscribe for further videos. Bye-bye.